Miss Romano, you've kept 3 very important men waiting for over 20 minutes. I looked up from my laptop, my fingers still hovering over the keyboard where I'd been documenting the 5th financial discrepancy I'd found in Moretti Industries' accounts. The woman standing in the doorway of the conference room wore a tailored black suit and an expression that suggested I'd committed some unforgivable sin by doing my job thoroughly. I wasn't aware I was expected anywhere else, I replied, keeping my voice level. The audit schedule clearly states I have this conference room reserved until 3 o'clock. It's currently 2:45. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Mr. Moretti doesn't operate on scheduled appointments for auditors. When he requests your presence, you go. Which Mr. Moretti? I asked, genuinely curious now. The company directories listed 3 Morettis in executive positions, all with the same last name, all appearing to be around the same age based on their employee photos. Brothers, I'd assumed, though the corporate structure made their relationship deliberately vague. All of them! Something in her tone made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I'd been a financial auditor for 4 years, working my way up from small firms to mid-sized corporations, and I'd learned to trust my instincts. There was something off about Moretti Industries, something that went deeper than the creative accounting I'd been hired to investigate. The numbers didn't just suggest tax optimization or aggressive depreciation schedules. They whispered secrets in a language I was only beginning to understand. I'll need 5 minutes to save my work and gather my materials, I said, already closing files and organizing my notes. 2 minutes. I met her eyes. 5. Unless you'd prefer I present my preliminary findings without proper documentation. She left without another word, and I allowed myself a small smile. I hadn't clawed my way out of Brooklyn on scholarships and student loans to be intimidated by corporate power plays. My mother had raised me to stand straight, speak clearly, and never apologize for taking up space in rooms where people thought I didn't belong. I gathered my tablet, a leather portfolio containing printed spreadsheets, and the flash drive with encrypted backups of everything I'd found. Whatever this meeting was about, I'd be prepared. The executive floor looked nothing like the rest of Moretti Industries, where the lower floors had been modern and corporate in that generic way that suggested interior design by committee. This level felt different, older. The wood paneling was genuine mahogany, not veneer. The artwork on the walls wasn't the mass-produced motivational pieces I'd seen elsewhere, but original paintings that probably cost more than my annual salary. Everything here spoke of old money, established power, and secrets kept behind closed doors. My escort stopped in front of a set of double doors at the end of the hallway. "They're waiting." She opened the doors and gestured for me to enter, but didn't follow. The doors closed behind me with a soft click that sounded unnervingly final. The office was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of New York City that must have cost a fortune in real estate alone. But I barely noticed the view because my attention was immediately captured by the 3 men standing in different positions around the room, all watching me with varying degrees of intensity. "Miss Romano." The man behind the desk didn't stand, didn't smile, didn't offer any of the corporate pleasantries I'd been expecting. He had dark hair, styled with precise care, steel gray eyes that seemed to calculate my net worth and potential usefulness in a single glance, and the kind of face that probably made shareholders nervous and competitors reckless. "You've been auditing our company for 2 weeks. I'm curious what you found that requires such meticulous documentation." "Mr. Moretti," I acknowledged, refusing to be rattled by his directness. "I was hired to conduct a thorough financial audit in preparation for your company's expansion into international markets. Thorough means comprehensive, which requires time and meticulous documentation, as you put it." "Dante," said the man leaning against the window, his tone warm, where the first man's had been cold. He pushed off from the wall and moved toward me with the kind of casual grace that suggested he was very aware of how attractive he was and exactly what effect it had on people. His dark hair was slightly longer, less severe, and his brown eyes held a spark of amusement. "We're all Moretti's here. I'm Marco, that's my brother Dante behind the desk, and the one trying to become invisible by the bookshelf is Luca." I glanced at the third brother, who'd been so still I'd almost missed him. He had the same dark hair, the same strong features, but his hazel eyes were different. Softer, somehow, despite the intensity with which he was studying me. He offered a small nod but didn't speak. "Isabella Romano," I said, though they obviously already knew that. "And I prefer to maintain professional boundaries, so Mr. Moretti works fine for me." Marco's smile widened. "She has spine. I like that." "I don't particularly care what you like," I replied, then immediately wondered if I'd pushed too far. But I was tired. I'd been surviving on coffee and determination for 2 weeks, and these men had summoned me, like some kind of medieval lord demanding a subject's presence. "You asked what I've found. Would you like the summary or the detailed breakdown?" "Summary," Dante said, his fingers steepled in front of him. "We're all very busy people." I pulled out my tablet, calling up the presentation I'd been preparing. Moretti Industries operates 17 subsidiary companies across 6 states. On paper, your revenue streams appear legitimate, and your tax filings are technically compliant. However, the patterns of cash flow between subsidiaries suggest a sophisticated money laundering operation. Large sums enter through what appear to be consulting fees and construction contracts, get distributed through a network of shell companies, and emerge clean through your real estate holdings. Additionally, your employee-to-revenue ratios are inconsistent with industry standards. You have too many people on payroll for the amount of legitimate business you appear to conduct, which suggests either massive inefficiency or those employees serve purposes not reflected in your corporate documentation. The silence that followed my summary was absolute. Marco's smile had vanished. Luca had gone completely still, his hand resting on a bookshelf, as if he needed it for support. Dante's expression hadn't changed at all, which was somehow more unnerving than if he'd reacted. "Those are serious accusations," Dante finally said, his voice quiet and dangerous. "They're observations," I corrected. "Accusations would involve me reporting these findings to the Securities and Exchange Commission or the FBI, which I haven't done, because I was hired to audit your books, not investigate potential criminal activity. My job is to identify irregularities and recommend corrective actions before your international expansion. Whether you choose to implement those recommendations or fire me and find a more compliant auditor is entirely your decision." "And if we did fire you?" Marco asked, his casual tone not quite masking something harder underneath. "What would you do with all those meticulous observations?" I met his gaze steadily. "I'd submit my findings to the firm that contracted me, as required by my professional obligations. What they do with that information is beyond my control." "She's cornered us," Luca spoke for the first time, his voice quieter than his brother's, but somehow carrying more weight. "Smart." "Or foolish," Dante countered. "Miss Romano, do you understand what you've just accused us of?" "I understand exactly what I've observed in your financial records," I said, my heart pounding, but my voice remaining steady. "I also understand that you have 3 choices. 1. Cooperate with me to restructure your operations in a way that eliminates these irregularities, and makes your company actually viable for international expansion. 2. Fire me, and hope the next auditor is less thorough or more corrupt. 3. Attempt to intimidate or silence me, which would be both illegal and stupid, since I've already implemented multiple backup protocols for my findings. Marco laughed, an unexpected sound that broke the tension. She called us stupid, Dante. I don't think anyone's called us stupid in at least a decade. I said intimidating or silencing me would be stupid, I clarified. I made no assessment of your general intelligence, though your financial structures do suggest considerable sophistication. A compliment wrapped in an insult, Marco said, moving closer. He stopped just inside my personal space, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle. You're either incredibly brave, or you have no idea who you're dealing with. I'm an auditor, Mr. Moretti. I deal with numbers, patterns, and facts. Who you are outside this office is irrelevant to the work I was hired to do. Is it? He tilted his head, studying me with those warm brown eyes. Because I think you're smart enough to have figured out that Moretti Industries isn't just another corporation. I think you've connected dots that go beyond creative accounting, and I think you're standing here, alone in a room with 3 men who could make your life very difficult, because you believe your intelligence and preparation will protect you. My mouth went dry. He was right, of course. Now, I'd suspected from the first week that something was deeply wrong with this company. The patterns in their finances matched case studies I'd reviewed in graduate school, examples of organized crime operations hidden behind legitimate business fronts. But I'd also spent the past 2 weeks researching the Moretti family through public records and news archives, and what I'd found had been surprisingly contradictory. Yes, there were rumors, whispers of connections to organized crime, suggestions of violence and corruption, but there were also stories of the Moretti family's charitable contributions, their employment of hundreds of people in communities where jobs were scarce, their reputation for loyalty and protection of those under their umbrella. The truth seemed more complex than simple criminality, which was partly why I decided to confront them directly, rather than immediately running to federal authorities. I believe that everyone operates according to incentives, I said carefully. You hired me to audit your company because you want something, presumably access to international markets and the legitimacy that comes with proper financial structures. I can help you get that, or I can become a problem you don't need. The choice is yours. Dante stood for the first time, and I realized he was taller than I'd expected, his presence commanding even without the desk between us. He moved around it with deliberate slowness, each step measured and controlled. When he stopped in front of me, I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. You think you can help us, Miss Romano? You think you understand our business well enough to restructure it? I think I understand finances well enough to create legal structures that serve your purposes without exposing you to the kind of scrutiny that attracts federal investigations, I replied. What I don't understand is why you're running a sophisticated operation through such obviously questionable channels. You're smart enough to do better, which means either you don't care about the risk, or you haven't had access to someone with the expertise to build you a better system. Something flickered in Dante's steel-gray eyes. Surprise, maybe, or reassessment. And you believe you have that expertise? I graduated top of my class from Columbia Business School, with a specialization in international finance and corporate restructuring. I've worked with companies transitioning from questionable practices to legitimate operations. I know how to build financial structures that can withstand scrutiny while still serving your underlying business purposes. The question isn't whether I can help you. The question is whether you're willing to let me. She's offering us a deal, Lucas said, from his position by the bookshelf. He'd moved closer during the conversation, I noticed, no longer trying to fade into the background. Cooperation in exchange for her silence and expertise. I'm offering you a professional service, I corrected, looking at him directly for the first time. His hazel eyes were remarkable, I realized, shot through with gold that caught the light, like they were also watching me, with an intensity that made me feel exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the financial records I'd uncovered. Whether you accept that service or not is your decision. What do you want in return? Dante asked bluntly. Money? A percentage of our profits? Protection? I want to do my job properly, I said. I want to build something that works, that doesn't collapse the moment someone looks too closely. I want to prove that I can solve complex problems that other auditors would either miss or run away from. And yes, I want appropriate compensation for that work, at rates we can negotiate like professionals. Marco moved to lean against Dante's desk, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. You realize that accepting this offer means becoming part of our world? Once you're inside, Miss Romano, you can't simply walk away when the work is done. You'd know too much. Then we'll structure a contract that protects both parties, I said, though my heart rate had accelerated at the implied threat in his words. Confidentiality agreements, non-disclosure clauses, whatever legal protections you require. I'm not interested in exposing your business. I'm interested in fixing it. The three brothers exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them that I couldn't interpret. Finally, Dante nodded slightly. We'll consider your proposal, he said. In the meantime, you'll join us for dinner tonight. 8 o'clock. My assistant will provide you with the address. It wasn't a request, and we all knew it. This was a test, an evaluation, a chance for them to probe deeper into who I was and whether I could be trusted or controlled. I have plans tonight, I lied, because giving in too easily would set a precedent I couldn't afford. Cancel them, Dante said flatly. If you want to work with us, Miss Romano, you need to understand that our business doesn't operate on a standard 9-to-5 schedule. Flexibility is required. I considered refusing, considered drawing a hard line about personal boundaries and professional limits. But I'd already committed to this path when I walked into their office with observations about money laundering instead of running to federal authorities. Backing down now would make me look weak or unreliable. Fine, I agreed. But I'm driving myself, and I'm leaving when I choose to leave. Marco's smile returned. We wouldn't dream of holding you hostage, Miss Romano. Though I suspect by the end of the evening, you'll want to stay. I ignored the suggestion in his tone and gathered my materials. Is there anything else you need from me right now? Yes, Lucas said quietly, speaking directly to me for the first time since his earlier comment. I need you to understand something before you commit to this path. We're not good men, Isabella. We do things that would horrify you if you knew the details. But we protect what's ours with absolute loyalty. If you become part of this family's business, you become part of what we protect. That's both a promise and a warning. The use of my first name sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. There was something in the way he said it, something gentle and dangerous at the same time, that made me acutely aware of him in a way I hadn't been moments before. I appreciate the warning, I managed. my voice not quite as steady as I would have liked. "I'll see you tonight." I walked out of that office with my head high and my spine straight, but my hands were trembling when I reached the elevator. I'd just made a deal with 3 men who were almost certainly involved in organized crime. I'd offered to help them hide their illegal activities behind legitimate business structures. I'd agreed to have dinner with them in what would undoubtedly be a setting designed to intimidate and evaluate me. My mother would have been horrified. She'd raised me to be honest, ethical, principled. She'd worked 3 jobs to keep me in good schools, to give me opportunities she'd never had, to ensure I wouldn't end up trapped in the kind of life she'd escaped when she left my father. My father. I'd never known him, never asked about him, because the pain in my mother's eyes whenever the topic arose made it clear that some stories were better left buried. All I knew was that he'd been involved in something criminal, something that had forced my mother to run when she was pregnant with me, to build a new life far away from whatever darkness he'd represented. What would she think if she knew I'd just willingly walked into the same kind of darkness she'd fled? But as I drove back to my small apartment in Brooklyn, I couldn't shake the feeling that this decision was somehow inevitable. The Moretti brothers had pulled me into their orbit, and I was either brilliant enough to navigate these dangerous waters or foolish enough to drown in them. I'd find out which at dinner tonight. The address Dante's assistant had sent led me to a restaurant in Manhattan that didn't have a sign, just a discreet street number and a doorman who checked my name against a list before allowing me entry. Inside, the lighting was low and intimate. The tables spaced far enough apart to ensure private conversations remained private. This wasn't the kind of place where corporate executives took clients for tax-deductible business meals. This was where powerful people came to discuss things that couldn't be discussed in more public venues. A hostess led me through the main dining room to a private area in the back, separated from the rest of the restaurant by frosted glass panels. The 3 Moretti brothers were already seated at a table set for 4, and they all stood when I entered. The gesture was old-fashioned and unexpectedly courteous. "Isabella," Marco greeted me, his smile warm and welcoming. "You found us. Please sit." The only available chair was positioned so that I'd be sitting with my back to the wall, facing the entrance to the private room. A position of security, I realized, or perhaps a position that ensured I couldn't easily leave without them noticing. "Thank you for coming," Dante said once we were all seated. He'd changed from his business suit into something more casual, but no less expensive, dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that made his gray eyes even more striking. "I know we didn't give you much choice, but I appreciate your cooperation." "Did I have a choice?" I asked, accepting a menu from the server who'd appeared silently at my elbow. "There's always a choice," Luca said quietly, and he was sitting directly across from me, his hazel eyes reflecting the candlelight on the table. "You could have refused. You could have gone to the authorities with what you found. You could have quietly resigned from the audit and walked away. But you didn't. Why?" It was a good question, one I'd been asking myself all afternoon. I could have given him the professional answer, something about solving complex problems and building my reputation. But sitting here with 3 men who were clearly more dangerous than their corporate positions suggested, I found myself wanting to be honest. "Because I'm tired of safe choices," I admitted. "I've spent my entire life doing everything right. Perfect grades, perfect resume, perfect career trajectory. And where has it gotten me? A studio apartment in Brooklyn, and student loans that will take decades to pay off. And a job where I'm expected to overlook irregularities because that's what makes clients happy. I saw your financial records, and I saw a puzzle that actually challenged me. I saw the possibility of building something significant instead of just maintaining someone else's mediocre systems. So I made a choice that wasn't safe. Maybe it wasn't smart either, but at least it was mine. The brothers exchanged those meaningful glances again, and I wondered what they were thinking, what they saw when they looked at me. A useful tool? A potential threat? Something else entirely? "Tell us about yourself," Marco said, shifting the conversation smoothly. "Beyond the impressive resume, who is Isabella Romano when she's not auditing suspicious corporations?" "There isn't much to tell," I said, uncomfortable with the personal direction. "I grew up in Brooklyn, raised by a single mother. I went to school, got scholarships, worked my way through college and graduate school. I've been focused on building a career, so I don't have much of a personal life to speak of." "No family besides your mother?" Dante asked, his tone carefully neutral. Something in the question made me wary. "No. My mother died 2 years ago. Cancer. It was just the two of us." "I'm sorry," Luca said, and the sympathy in his voice sounded genuine. "Losing a parent is never easy." "No, it's not," I agreed quietly. "She was everything to me. She sacrificed so much to give me opportunities she never had. Everything I've accomplished, I owe to her." "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Marco observed. "Did she ever talk about your father?" There it was again, that subtle probing that felt like more than casual conversation. "No. She made it clear that he wasn't someone she wanted in our lives. I learned not to ask." "Curious," Dante murmured, taking a sip of wine. "Most children want to know about their absent parents." "Most children don't learn to read their parents' pain," I countered. "My mother carried scars from whatever happened with my father. Asking about him meant opening those wounds. I loved her too much to do that." The server returned with appetizers I didn't remember ordering, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. Marco told stories about growing up with two brothers, the constant competition and camaraderie. Luca talked about his love of architecture and how he'd wanted to be a designer before family obligations pulled him in other directions. Dante remained more reserved, but even he occasionally contributed observations that suggested a sharp wit beneath the cold exterior. As the evening progressed, I found myself relaxing despite my initial wariness. These men were dangerous, yes, but they were also intelligent, cultured, and unexpectedly good company. Marco made me laugh with his self-deprecating humor. Luca's quiet observations revealed a depth of thought I hadn't expected. Even Dante's rare smiles felt like achievements, small victories in breaking through his carefully maintained control. It was after the main course, when the server had cleared our plates and left us with coffee and dessert, that the real conversation began. "We've made a decision about your proposal," Dante said, his tone shifting back to business. "We're willing to work with you on restructuring our financial operations. However, there are conditions." "I expected there would be," I replied, setting down my coffee cup. "What are they?" "First, you work exclusively for us. No other clients, no divided attention. We'll compensate you appropriately for the exclusivity." "How appropriately?" I asked, because money might not have been my primary motivation, but I wasn't foolish enough to not negotiate. Dante named a figure that was triple my current salary, and I carefully kept my expression neutral, despite my shock. "Second," he continued, "you sign comprehensive non-disclosure agreements. Everything you learn about our business stays confidential, permanently." "Standard practice," I agreed. "Third, you move your base of operations to our main office. We'll provide you with a private workspace, access to all necessary records, and whatever resources you require. Also reasonable, I said. Fourth, and here Dante's eyes locked with mine, you accept that this work will put you in situations that may be uncomfortable or morally ambiguous. We need someone who can work in shades of gray, not someone who will flee the moment things get complicated. I'm sitting here, aren't I? I pointed out. I think I've already demonstrated my comfort with gray areas. Perhaps, Luca said softly, but understanding something intellectually and experiencing it directly are very different things. What we're offering you isn't just a job, Isabella. It's entry into a world that operates by different rules than the one you've known. Once you're inside, you'll see things, learn things, become part of things that you can't unknow or walk away from. Is this another warning? I asked, meeting his gaze across the table. It's the truth, he replied. We're giving you one final chance to make a different choice. Walk away now, tonight, and we'll pay you fairly for the work you've already done. Your findings will disappear, and you can return to your normal life with no consequences. But if you stay, if you accept our offer, you need to understand that you're binding yourself to us in ways that go beyond a standard employment contract. I should have been terrified. Every instinct should have been screaming at me to take the exit they were offering, to run back to my safe, a small life, and forget I'd ever encountered the Moretti brothers. But instead, I felt a strange certainty settling over me, a sense that this moment had been inevitable from the first time I'd spotted those patterns in their financial records. I accept your conditions, I said firmly. All of them. Marco's eyes gleamed with something that might have been triumph or satisfaction. No hesitation at all. You're either very brave or very foolish, Isabella. Maybe I'm both, I replied. Or maybe I just recognize an opportunity when I see one. When do I start? Monday, Dante said. My assistant will send you the contract details and access information tomorrow. For now, let's finish our evening on a more pleasant note. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of conversation and wine. Here are the brothers now treating me as something between a colleague and a curiosity. When we finally stood to leave, I felt slightly unsteady, though whether from the wine or the magnitude of what I'd just committed to, I couldn't say. Let me drive you home, Luca offered as we exited the restaurant. You shouldn't be behind the wheel right now. I'm fine, I protested, but he was already gesturing to a car idling at the curb. Humor me, he said, his voice gentle but firm. It's late. You're tired, and we just made you a life-changing offer. The least we can do is ensure you get home safely. I didn't have the energy to argue, so I slid into the back seat of the black sedan, Luca following and settling beside me. The driver pulled smoothly into traffic without needing directions, which meant they already knew where I lived. I should have found that alarming, but I was too exhausted to work up proper outrage. You surprised us today, Luca said quietly as we drove through Manhattan's glittering streets. We expected you to be intimidated or greedy. Instead, you were honest and brave. It's refreshing. I'm not sure brave is the right word, I replied, watching the city lights blur past the window. Reckless might be more accurate. There's a fine line between the two, he observed. Isabella, I need you to promise me something. I turned to look at him, finding his face closer than I'd expected in the dim interior of the car. What? Promise that if you ever feel unsafe, if you ever want out, you'll tell me. Not Dante, not Marco. Me. I'll find a way to protect you, even if it means going against my brothers. The intensity in his voice startled me. Why would you do that? Because someone should, he said simply. And because when I look at you, I see someone who deserves better than the life we're offering. But I also see someone strong enough to survive it, maybe even transform it. That's rare, Isabella. Worth protecting. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I simply nodded. We spent the rest of the drive in silence, but it was comfortable, rather than awkward. Two people existing in the same space without needing to fill it with meaningless words. When we reached my apartment building, Luca walked me to the door despite my protests. "Welcome to the family, Isabella Romano," he said, and there was something in the way he said it that made it sound like both a blessing and a curse. "I have a feeling you're going to change everything." Then he was gone, sliding back into the car and disappearing into the New York night, leaving me standing on my doorstep, wondering what exactly I'd just agreed to. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, unlocked the door, and collapsed onto my second-hand couch. My phone buzzed with an email from Dante's assistant, containing the contract and start date details, just as promised. I should have reviewed it immediately, should have called a lawyer to examine the terms. Instead, I closed my eyes and tried to slow my racing heart, tried to convince myself that I'd made the right choice, that I was smart enough and strong enough to navigate whatever came next. Somewhere in the city, three brothers were probably discussing me, analyzing my responses, calculating my usefulness, and somewhere in my chest, my heart was beating faster than it should, remembering the way Luca's eyes had softened when he promised to protect me, the way Marco's smile had made my stomach flutter, the way Dante's rare approval had felt like winning an impossible prize. I'd walked into their world, thinking I could maintain professional boundaries, could treat this like any other job, but already I could feel those boundaries beginning to blur, could sense that the Moretti brothers were going to complicate my life in ways I couldn't yet imagine. What I didn't know, couldn't have known as I fell asleep that night, was just how right that premonition would turn out to be. The scream tore from my throat before I was fully conscious, my body jerking against restraints that cut into my wrists, cold concrete beneath me, darkness pressing down like a physical weight, and somewhere in the distance, voices speaking in rapid Italian. "She's awake. Boss wants to know what we should do with her." This couldn't be happening. It had been 3 weeks since I'd started working for the Moretti brothers. 3 weeks of restructuring their financial empire and slowly beginning to understand the full scope of their operations. 3 weeks of growing comfortable with Luca's quiet presence as he worked in my office, Marco's surprise lunch deliveries and terrible jokes, Dante's rare but meaningful praise when I solved particularly complex problems. 3 weeks, and I'd started to believe I was safe within their protection. I'd been walking to my car after a late night at the office when someone had grabbed me from behind, a cloth pressed to my face that smelled sickly sweet. I'd fought, I remembered fighting, but then nothing, until I woke up here. "Please," I tried to say, but my throat was raw, and the word came out as a croak. "There's been a mistake." Footsteps approached, and a figure crouched in front of me. In the dim light, filtering through a high window, I could make out a man's face, middle-aged, with a scar running down his left cheek. "No mistake, Miss Romano," he said in accented English. "You work for the Morettis now, which makes you valuable. A message they need to receive about respecting territory that doesn't belong to them." Terror crystallized into clarity. This wasn't about me. It was about them, about whatever war the Moretti brothers were fighting in the shadows of their legitimate business operations. I was collateral damage, a pawn in a game I'd been naive enough to think I understood. They don't care about me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear coursing through my veins. "I'm just an employee, a financial consultant. I'm not worth starting a war over." The man laughed, An ugly sound. Is that what you think? You don't see how they look at you. How protective the quiet one gets when anyone mentions your name. How the charming one brings you lunch, like you're something precious. How the cold one actually smiles when you walk into his office. I blinked, confused by his observations. Yes, the brothers had been kind to me, but that didn't mean anything beyond professional courtesy. Did it? You're wrong, I whispered, but doubt crept into my voice. We'll see, he said, standing. We sent them a photo of you an hour ago. If you're right and you don't matter, they won't respond. If I'm right and you've somehow become important to 3 men who don't care about anything except power and family, well, then things get interesting. He walked away, leaving me alone in the darkness with my thoughts spiraling. How had this become my life? 4 weeks ago, I'd been a normal auditor with a normal career trajectory. Now I was tied to a chair in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse, being used as leverage in a conflict I didn't understand. My mother had been right to run from my father's world. I should have seen the warning signs, should have recognized that you couldn't work for people like the Morettis without becoming entangled in their violence. But I'd been arrogant, believing my intelligence and usefulness would insulate me from the darker aspects of their business. I'd been so incredibly foolish. Time passed in a blur of fear and discomfort. My shoulders ached from the position of my arms behind the chair. My throat burned with thirst, and my mind kept replaying every interaction with the Moretti brothers, searching for signs I'd missed, warnings I'd ignored. Then, suddenly, chaos erupted. The door to the warehouse exploded inward, with a crash that made me flinch. Gunfire, sharp and terrifying, echoed through the space. Voices shouting in Italian and English, the sound of bodies hitting the floor. I pressed my eyes shut, not wanting to see, not wanting to be present for whatever violence was unfolding. Isabella! My eyes flew open at the sound of Luca's voice, desperate and afraid in a way I'd never heard from him. He appeared in front of me, his usually gentle hazel eyes wild with something that looked like rage and relief mixed together. There was blood on his shirt, but I couldn't tell if it was his. I've got you, he murmured, producing a knife and cutting through my restraints with quick, efficient movements. You're safe now. I've got you. My arms dropped to my sides, pins and needles shooting through them as circulation returned. I would have fallen if Luca hadn't caught me, pulling me against his chest and holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. You came, I gasped out, still not quite believing it. Of course we came, he said fiercely. Did you think we'd leave you to these animals? Did you think you didn't matter? Before I could respond, Marco appeared beside us, his usually perfect appearance disheveled, his warm brown eyes scanning me for injuries. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? I'm fine, I managed, though I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. Just scared. Let's get her out of here. Dante's voice cut through the chaos, calm and controlled, despite the violence that had just occurred. Luca, carry her. Marco, clear a path. We're leaving. Luca scooped me up, as if I weighed nothing, cradling me against his chest as he followed his brothers through the warehouse. I kept my eyes fixed on his face, not wanting to see the bodies I knew we were passing, the evidence of what these men were capable of when something they valued was threatened. The drive to wherever we were going passed in a haze. I was in a car, pressed between Luca and Marco in the back seat, while Dante sat in front with the driver. Someone had draped a jacket over my shoulders. Soon someone else had given me water. Gentle hands checked my wrists, where the restraints had cut into my skin. We're taking you to the estate, Dante said, turning in his seat to look at me. His steel-gray eyes were intense, burning with an emotion I couldn't identify. "You'll be safe there. No one can touch you behind those walls." "I want to go home," I protested weakly. "Your apartment isn't secure," he replied flatly. "Until we've eliminated this threat, you stay with us." I didn't have the strength to argue. Besides, he was right. Whoever had taken me knew where I lived, knew my routines. Home wasn't safe anymore. The Moretti estate was a fortress, masquerading as an elegant mansion, set back from the road behind high walls and sophisticated security systems. Inside, it was surprisingly beautiful, all dark wood and rich colors. Art that probably cost more than most people's houses, and an atmosphere of old money and older secrets. They brought me to a bedroom that was larger than my entire apartment, with an attached bathroom and a view of gardens I could barely see in the darkness. A woman appeared with first aid supplies, treating the raw skin on my wrists with gentle efficiency, while the brothers watched from various positions around the room. "You should rest," Luca said once the woman had left. "We'll be right outside if you need anything." "Wait," I said, my voice stronger now that the shock was beginning to wear off. "I need to understand what just happened. Who took me? Why? And what did you do to get me back?" The brothers exchanged one of their silent looks, and I felt a flash of anger cut through my lingering fear. "Don't do that," I snapped. "You don't have your silent conversations and decide what I can handle. I was kidnapped and used as leverage because I work for you. I deserve to know the truth." Dante moved to the window, his back to me as he spoke. "There are families in this city who believe we've overstepped our territory. We've been expanding our operations, consolidating power, and that's made some people nervous. They took you to send a message that we're vulnerable, that we care about more than just business and family." "The man who took me said you'd come for me," I said slowly, pieces clicking together. "He said it like it was a test, like he wanted to prove that I mattered to you." "You do matter," Marco said quietly, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. "More than you should, probably. More than is smart for any of us." I stared at him, my heart beginning to race for entirely different reasons. "What does that mean?" "It means we've become attached to our brilliant auditor," he said with a sad smile. "It means when we received that photo of you bound to a chair, terrified and hurt, all three of us lost our minds a little. Dante stopped being strategic. I stopped being charming, and Luca nearly killed the messenger before we could extract information about your location." "You're our employee," Luca added, his voice rough. "We're supposed to protect our people, but somewhere in the last 3 weeks, you stopped being just an employee. You became someone we couldn't stand to lose." I looked between the three of them, seeing the truth in their expressions. Marco's usual playfulness was gone, replaced by something raw and honest. Luca's gentle demeanor masked barely controlled violence. The memory of how efficiently he'd cut through my restraints. And Dante, still facing the window, his shoulders rigid with tension I could feel from across the room. "I don't understand," I whispered. "I'm nobody. I'm just a woman trying to do a job." "You're not nobody," Dante said, finally turning to face me. "You're brilliant and brave, and so incredibly stubborn. You walked into our office and called us out on decades of carefully constructed financial deception. You didn't blink when we offered you a deal that should have terrified you. You've spent 3 weeks transforming our operations while simultaneously making us laugh and think and question assumptions we've held our entire lives. You're extraordinary, Isabella, and you don't even see it." Tears pricked at my eyes, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words and the way all three brothers were looking at me like I was something precious and fragile that they'd almost lost. "You barely know me," I protested. "We know enough," Marco said. "We know you work until midnight because you're obsessed with solving problems perfectly. We know you're allergic to shellfish because you panicked when I brought you shrimp scampi. We know you donate to 3 different charities, even though you're still paying off student loans. We know your mother taught you to be kind and strong, and that you miss her every single day. We know you hum when you're concentrating," Luca added softly, "and that you drink your coffee black in the morning, but add cream in the afternoon. We know you're afraid of thunderstorms, but you'd never admit it. We know you're lonely, Isabella, even though you'd never ask for company." "Stop," I said, my voice breaking. "Please stop." They did, silence falling over the room like a weight. I drew my knees up to my chest, wrapping my arms around them, trying to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. "You killed people tonight," I said finally. "To rescue me, you killed people." "Yes," Dante confirmed, no apology in his tone. "And that's just what you do? Violence and death are just part of your business?" "Yes," he repeated. I should have been horrified. I should have demanded they take me to the police. Should have run as far and as fast from these men as possible. But instead I found myself thinking about how gentle Luca's hands had been as he cut through my restraints. How Marco's eyes had searched my face for injuries with genuine concern. How Dante's voice had shaken with barely contained emotion when he'd ordered them to get me out. They'd come for me. When they could have written me off as an unfortunate casualty, when protecting me had clearly escalated whatever conflict they were fighting, they'd come anyway. "I need time," I said quietly, "to process all of this, to understand what I'm feeling and what I want." "Of course," Luca said immediately. "Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere, and neither are you until this situation is resolved." "We'll post guards outside your door," Dante added. "Not to keep you prisoner, but to keep you safe. This room is yours for as long as you need it." Marco stood, hesitating before moving to the door. "For what it's worth, Isabella, I'm sorry. Sorry we put you in danger. Sorry we complicated your life. Sorry we can't seem to stay away from you, even though that would probably be better for everyone." They filed out, leaving me alone in a bedroom that cost more than most people's yearly salary, in a house belonging to 3 mafia brothers who just admitted they cared about me more than was wise or safe. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and wondered what my mother would think if she could see me now. Would she be disappointed that I'd followed in my father's footsteps, getting involved with criminals? Or would she understand that sometimes the heart doesn't choose safe options? Sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, I dreamed of hazel eyes and warm smiles and steel-gray determination. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For a moment, I was disoriented. Then memory crashed back. The kidnapping, the rescue, the confessions. A soft knock on the door preceded Luca's entrance, carrying a tray with breakfast, and that promised coffee. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, setting the tray on a table by the window. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've stepped into an alternate reality," I admitted, sitting up. I was still wearing yesterday's clothes, rumpled and uncomfortable. "Is this really my life now?" "It can be whatever you want it to be," he said, settling into the chair across from where I moved to sit. "We meant what we said about not keeping you prisoner. If you want to leave, to walk away from all of this, we'll arrange protection until the threat is neutralized, and then you're free." "But you'd prefer I stay?" "Prefer is a weak word for what I feel," he said quietly. Isabella, I've spent my entire life being the quiet one, the observer, the peacekeeper between my brothers. I've watched them live with passion and purpose, while I just existed in the background. Then you walked into our lives, and for the first time, I wanted something for myself. Not for the family, not for the business. For me. My breath caught. Luca, I'm not asking you to choose me over my brothers, he interrupted. I see the way Marco makes you smile, the way you rise to Dante's challenges. I'm not blind, but I needed you to know that you matter. You matter to me in a way that terrifies me, because I don't know how to protect my heart and keep you safe at the same time. I stood, moving to the window to look out at the gardens I could now see in daylight. They were beautiful, meticulously maintained, a peaceful oasis that contradicted everything I knew about the violence these men were capable of. Your brothers said similar things last night, I said softly. About caring for me, about me mattering. But I don't understand how that's possible. We barely know each other. Sometimes knowing happens in moments instead of years, Luca replied. I knew my brothers would be the most important people in my life from the moment we were born together. I knew I wanted to protect people when I watched my father destroy someone for a betrayal. I knew you were going to change everything the first time you looked at me with those defiant eyes and refused to be intimidated. I turned to face him. I'm afraid, Luca. Afraid of this world you live in. Afraid of these feelings I don't know how to name. Afraid that caring about you and your brothers will destroy whatever pieces of myself I've managed to hold on to. He stood, crossing to me with those careful, measured movements that characterized everything he did. When he reached me, he lifted his hand slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, he cupped my cheek with a gentleness that made my throat tight. I'm afraid too, he admitted. Afraid that we'll damage something beautiful because we don't know how to exist without violence and secrets. But I'm more afraid of never knowing what we could be if we were brave enough to try. I leaned into his touch without meaning to, drawn by the warmth and safety he represented. Despite all evidence that safety was an illusion in his world. I should go home, I whispered. I should run far away from all of this. You should, he agreed. But will you? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The smart choice was obvious. Leave, return to my normal life, find a different job with a corporation that didn't moonlight as a criminal empire. But I thought about the past 3 weeks, about how alive I'd felt solving problems that actually challenged me. About how less lonely my world had become with Marco's surprise visits and Dante's rare praise and Luca's quiet companionship. I thought about how they'd come for me without hesitation, how they'd risked escalating a war to bring me home safe. I thought about my mother, who'd run from my father's world and spent her whole life looking over her shoulder, afraid the past would catch up to her. She'd been brave enough to escape, but she'd also been alone for all those years, never trusting anyone enough to let them close. Maybe there was a different kind of bravery in staying, in choosing to trust people who'd proven they'd protect me even when it wasn't logical or safe. No, I said finally, opening my eyes to meet Luca's gaze. I won't run. Not yet. Maybe that makes me foolish, but I need to see where this goes. I need to understand what this could become. Something shifted in his expression. Relief and joy and fear all tangled together. Then stay. Stay and let us show you that we can be more than what our world expects. Stay and help us build something better. What about the people who took me? The threat Dante mentioned? We're handling it, Luca said, and something cold flickered in his eyes. a reminder that he was capable of the same violence as his brothers despite his gentle demeanor. They made a mistake targeting you. They'll learn not to make that mistake again. I should have asked what handling it meant. I should have demanded details about the violence being done in my name. But I was learning that in this world, some questions were better left unasked. Over the next week, I lived in a strange suspended reality at the Moretti estate. During the day, I worked on restructuring their finances from a temporary office they'd set up, video conferencing with legitimate business contacts, and creating layers of legal protection around their operations. At night, I had dinner with the brothers, learning more about them as people rather than just dangerous criminals. Marco taught me to appreciate wine, explaining the subtleties of different regions and vintages with an enthusiasm that was endearing. We'd sit in the library after dinner, him telling stories about his travels, me laughing at his terrible impressions of various international business contacts. Dante showed me the legitimate side of their empire, the community centers they funded, the jobs they created, the families they'd helped when banks wouldn't give them loans. He was still reserved, still carefully controlled, but occasionally I'd catch him watching me with an expression that suggested he was reevaluating everything he thought he knew. And Luca continued to be my constant companion, working beside me in comfortable silence, bringing me coffee when I'd been staring at spreadsheets too long, making sure I ate and slept and didn't lose myself entirely in the work. It should have been awkward, living with three men who'd all separately confessed to caring about me. But instead it felt natural, like pieces clicking into place. They didn't compete for my attention or try to force me to choose between them. They just existed around me, supporting and protecting, and slowly wearing down the walls I'd built around my heart. One evening, after a particularly challenging day of negotiations with international partners, I found myself in the estate's gardens with a glass of wine, trying to clear my head. Marco found me there, settling onto the bench beside me without invitation. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. "I was thinking about my mother," I admitted, "about how she ran from this world and never looked back, wondering if she'd think I was making the same mistakes she did. Or maybe she'd think you were brave enough to make different choices," Marco suggested. "Your mother ran because she had to protect you. But you're not running. You're standing your ground and demanding that we be better than what we've been. That takes a different kind of courage." "I don't feel brave," I confessed. "I feel terrified most of the time." "Good," he said, his usual playfulness subdued. "Fear means you understand the stakes. Fear means you're smart enough to know this isn't a game." I turned to look at him, studying his face in the fading light. "What do you want from me, Marco?" "Really?" "I want to hear you laugh," he said simply. "I want to debate philosophy at 3 a.m. and watch you destroy my arguments with that brilliant mind. I want to show you beautiful things and watch your face light up. I want to make you happy, Isabella, because somewhere along the way, your happiness became essential to my own." "That's a lot of pressure to put on one person," I whispered. "I know," he admitted, "and I'm sorry for that. But I've never been good at hiding what I feel, at playing it cool or strategic like Dante. When I desire something, I burn for it. And God help me, I burned for you." He stood before I could respond, before I could process the intensity in his voice. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just needed you to know, to understand that this isn't casual for any of us. What we feel for you is consuming and terrifying and probably destructive, but it's real." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with my racing heart and the realization that I was falling for 3 men simultaneously, each in completely different ways. 10 days after my kidnapping, Dante called a meeting in his study. When I arrived, all three brothers were there, their expressions serious. "The threat has been neutralized," Dante said without preamble. "The family that took you has been dealt with. You're safe to return to your normal life if you choose." I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt an unexpected sense of loss. "What does dealt with mean?" "It means they won't bother you or us again," he replied, and I knew that was all the detail I'd get. "So I can go home? Back to my apartment? My regular life?" "If that's what you want," Luca said quietly. "Though we'd prefer you stay, both for security and because we've become accustomed to your presence." I looked between the three of them, these dangerous, complicated men who'd somehow become essential to my world in just over a month. "I need to know something first," I said. "This feeling you all claim to have for me, is it just possession? Wanting to keep something you've claimed? Or is it actually about me as a person?" Dante stood, moving around his desk with that controlled grace that was so characteristically him. "You want honesty? Fine. Initially, yes, you were a problem to be solved, an asset to be secured. But that changed. It changed when you challenged me in negotiations and I had to actually work to keep up with you. It changed when you looked at our dirtiest secrets and didn't run screaming. It changed when I realized that planning for the future meant planning for a future that included you. I've desired many things in my life," Marco added. "Power, respect, beautiful objects. But desire fades when it's satisfied. What I feel for you only grows stronger. You're not something I want to possess, Isabella. You're someone I want to know, to understand, to protect and challenge and celebrate." Luca was last, his hazel eyes holding mine with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "You asked me once why I'd protect you, even against my brothers. It's because when I look at you, I see home. Not this house, not our family legacy, but actual home. The place where I can be gentle without being weak, where I don't have to hide the parts of myself that don't fit the mold of what a Moretti should be. You're my peace, Isabella, in a life that's been nothing but violence and duty." I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by their words, by the weight of three separate but equally intense devotions. "I don't know how to choose between you. I don't know if I can." "Then don't." My eyes flew open at Dante's words. He was closer now, close enough that I could see the calculation in his steel-gray eyes, the strategic mind working through an impossible problem. "What?" I breathed. "Don't choose," he repeated. "We're brothers, Isabella. We've shared everything since birth. Our legacy, our empire, our enemies. Why should love be different?" "You can't be serious," I said, looking between them. "That's not how the world works." "Our world has never followed conventional rules," Marco pointed out. "We make our own rules, create our own structures. If the three of us can share power over a criminal empire, why can't we share love for one extraordinary woman?" "Because that's insane," I protested, even as something in my chest loosened at the possibility. "Because society doesn't accept that kind of relationship. Because it's complicated and messy and probably impossible." "Since when do you care about what society accepts?" Luca challenged gently. "You're working for the mafia, Isabella. You've already stepped outside conventional boundaries." He was right, and I hated and loved him for it. I'd already made so many choices that defied everything I'd been taught about right and wrong, safe and dangerous. What was one more impossible decision? "I need time," I said finally. "Time to think about what this would actually mean, what it would look like. Time to figure out if I'm brave enough or foolish enough to try." "Take all the time you need," Dante said. But know this, whether you choose one of us, all of us, or none of us, you're under our protection. You're family now, Isabella, and we protect our family absolutely. I left the study with my mind spinning, wandering the estate's hallways, until I found myself back in the bedroom that had become mine over the past week and a half. I sat on the bed, trying to organize my thoughts into something coherent. I loved Luca. I could admit that now. I loved his gentleness and his hidden strength, his quiet observations and the way he made me feel safe. I desired Marco, desired his passion and his joy, his ability to make me laugh and think and feel things I'd never let myself feel before. I needed Dante, needed his strength and his certainty, his strategic mind that complemented my own, his rare smiles that felt like victories. And apparently, I didn't have to choose between them. They were offering me something unprecedented, something that should have been impossible, but felt inevitable given who they were and what they'd built together. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me open it. Your mother's name was Elena Romano. Before she married, she was Elena Caruso. Ask your Morettis what happened to Antonio Romano's wife. Ask them why your mother spent her life running. My blood ran cold. I stared at the message, reading it over and over, until the words burned into my brain. Then I was moving, running down the hallway, bursting into Dante's study without knocking. Here all three brothers looked up, alarm crossing their faces at whatever they saw in my expression. "Who was Antonio Romano?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "And what did he have to do with my mother?" The silence that followed was damning. They knew. God help me, they'd known all along. "Isabella," Dante started, but I cut him off. Don't try to manage me or manipulate me. Just tell me the truth." Luca moved toward me, but I stepped back. "Antonio Romano was our father's consigliere," he said quietly. "His most trusted advisor. 15 years ago, he betrayed the family. He stole money and sold secrets that got people killed. When our father discovered the betrayal, Antonio disappeared. We assumed he'd been killed by a rival family or had fled the country. And my mother," I whispered, though I already knew the answer. "She was his wife," Marco confirmed. "Elena Caruso married Antonio Romano 3 months before you were born. When he betrayed us, she vanished too. We never knew if she'd been part of his betrayal or if she'd escaped from him." The room spun. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my history, my mother's choices, rearranged itself into a new and terrible pattern. "You knew," I said, my voice breaking. "You knew who I was from the beginning. That's why you were so interested in me, why you brought me into your organization. You wanted to use me to find him." "No," Dante said sharply, standing. "We didn't know at first. When you showed up for the audit, you were just another financial consultant. But when we ran a background check and saw your mother's maiden name, we realized who you were. And yes, initially we thought you might lead us to your father. But that's not why we kept you, Isabella. That's not why any of this happened." "How can I believe that?" I asked, tears streaming down my face now. "How can I believe anything you've said when you've been lying to me from the beginning?" "We didn't lie," Luca said desperately. "We just didn't tell you something that would hurt you for no reason. Your mother protected you from this world. We weren't going to destroy that protection unless it became necessary." "Well, it's necessary now," I shouted, "because someone just sent me a message telling me to ask you about her. Someone out there knows who I am and is using it against us. So congratulations, you've dragged me into the exact life my mother died trying to keep me out of." I turned to leave, but Marco grabbed my arm gently. "Isabella, please. Let us explain everything. Let us show you the evidence. Let us prove that whatever we felt initially, what we feel now is real. I jerked my arm away. I need space. I need to think. I need to not be surrounded by 3 men who've been keeping secrets from me while claiming to care about me. You can't leave, Dante said, and there was real fear in his voice now. If someone contacted you about your mother, about Antonio, that means you're a target. That means they think they can use you to get to us or to flush him out if he's still alive. I don't care, I said, even though that wasn't true. I can't be here right now. I can't look at you and not wonder what else you're hiding. Then I'll take you somewhere else, Luca offered. Somewhere safe, but away from here. A property we own where you can have space but still be protected. Please, Isabella, don't run out into danger just because you're angry at us. I wanted to refuse, wanted to storm out, and prove I didn't need their protection or their care. But I wasn't stupid enough to ignore a genuine threat just because my heart was breaking. Fine, I agreed, but I go alone. No guards, no surveillance, no interference. I can't agree to that, Dante said flatly. Then we have a problem, I shot back. Because I'm leaving this house whether you agree or not. The only question is whether I go somewhere you know about or disappear somewhere you'll never find me. They looked at each other, and I could see the argument happening in those silent glances. Finally, Luca nodded. There's a cabin upstate. Private, secure, but isolated. I'll take you there and leave. You can have your space, but there will be security on the perimeter. Distant enough that you won't see them. Close enough that they can respond if there's a threat. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best compromise I'd get from 3 overprotective mafia brothers who apparently had both a personal and ancestral connection to destroying my life. Within an hour, I was in a car with Luca, driving north through the darkness. We didn't speak, the silence heavy with everything unsaid. When we finally arrived at the cabin, he helped me carry my bag inside, showed me how the security system worked, and then hesitated at the door. I know you don't want to hear this right now, he said quietly, but I need you to know that we should have told you sooner. We were wrong to keep it from you. But everything else, everything we said about what you mean to us, that was true. That is true. I don't know what's true anymore, I admitted, exhausted and heartbroken. I need time to figure out who I am when I'm not being lied to by the people I trusted. He flinched like I'd hit him, and part of me was glad for it. Then he nodded and left, and I was alone in a strange cabin with my shattered assumptions and broken trust. I spent the night going through everything I knew about my mother's life, looking for signs I'd missed, clues that she'd been running from more than just a bad marriage. The pieces fit too well. Her paranoia about staying off databases, her insistence that I use her maiden name, her fear of anyone from before finding us. She hadn't just been running from my father. She'd been running from the entire world he'd betrayed, and I'd walked right back into it, seduced by 3 men who'd known exactly who I was, and chosen not to tell me until circumstances forced their hand. By morning, I'd made a decision. I couldn't change my parentage or my mother's choices, but I could control what happened next. I could choose who I wanted to be and what kind of life I wanted to build. Even if that life was complicated and unconventional and probably dangerous, I pulled out my phone and sent a message to all 3 brothers. We need to talk. All of us. Tomorrow. Here. The response was immediate from all 3. We'll be there. I spent the rest of the day preparing, organizing my thoughts and my questions, trying to figure out how to rebuild trust that had been shattered by well-intentioned lies. Because despite everything, despite the secrets and the danger and the impossibility of what they were offering, I wasn't ready to walk away. I was my mother's daughter, yes, but I was also my own woman, and I got to choose my own path. Even if that path led straight into the heart of the darkness she'd spent her life fleeing. They arrived together in the late afternoon, 3 men in a black SUV, their expressions somber as they approached the cabin. I watched from the window, my heart racing despite my determination to stay calm and rational. 24 hours of solitude hadn't made me miss them less, hadn't made my feelings any less complicated. If anything, the distance had clarified just how deeply I'd fallen for all 3 of them. I opened the door before they could knock, stepping aside to let them enter. They filed in silently, arranging themselves in the living room, with a carefulness that suggested they were afraid of spooking me. Marco sat on the couch, Dante took the armchair, and Luca remained standing by the fireplace, his eyes never leaving my face. "Thank you for coming," I said, staying near the door like I might need to escape. "I've spent the last day thinking about everything that's happened, about the secrets you kept, and why you kept them. I have questions, and I need honest answers. No more protecting me from painful truths." "We'll tell you anything you want to know," Dante said immediately. "Ask." I took a breath, steadying myself. "My father, Antonio Romano, is he alive?" "We don't know," Dante admitted. "After he betrayed our family, he vanished. We searched for years, but he was either dead or very good at hiding. When your mother disappeared at the same time, we assumed they were together, but we never found proof." "My mother died 2 years ago," I said. "She was alone, except for me. She never mentioned him, never showed any sign that he was part of her life. So either he abandoned her when she was pregnant, or she escaped from him before I was born. Given the timeline, the second option seems more likely," Marco said gently. "You were born 3 months after they married, which means she was already pregnant when he betrayed us. She probably realized what he'd done and ran to protect you. It aligned with everything I knew about my mother, her fierce protectiveness, and her paranoia. She hadn't just been running from my father. She'd been running from anyone who might use me to get to him or punish his betrayal." "What did he steal?" I asked. "What was the betrayal?" Luca's jaw tightened. "Money, first, about $5 million from various family accounts. But that wasn't the real damage. He sold information to a rival family about our operations, our weaknesses, our personnel. That information led to an ambush that killed 7 of our people, including our Uncle Marco." I looked at Marco, understanding now why he carried that name, the weight of legacy, and the lost family that shaped his life. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm sorry my father did that to you." "You're not responsible for his choices," Dante said firmly. "We don't hold you accountable for his sins, Isabella. We never did." "But you didn't tell me," I pointed out. "You let me work for you, let me into your lives, and you never mentioned that my father was the man who betrayed your family. Why?" The brothers exchanged glances, and finally Luca spoke. "At first, we weren't sure how much you knew. If you were aware of your father's past, you might have been bait, sent by him or a rival family to infiltrate our organization. So we watched you, tested you, looked for signs of deception." "And when you realized I was innocent?" I asked. "Then we didn't know how to tell you," Marco admitted. "How do you tell someone that their father was a traitor who got people killed? That their mother spent her life running from the consequences of his actions? We knew it would hurt you, and the longer we waited, the harder it became to find the right moment." There was never going to be a right moment, I said, frustration bleeding into my voice. But I deserved the truth. I deserved to make informed choices about who I was working with and what risks I was taking. You're right, Dante acknowledged. We were cowards. We told ourselves we were protecting you, but really we were protecting ourselves from potentially losing you. That was selfish and wrong, and we're sorry. The apology was so unexpected, so unlike the controlled, strategic Dante I'd come to know, that I felt my anger deflating slightly. I need to know you won't keep things from me anymore, I said. If we're going to try this, whatever this is, I need complete honesty, even when the truth is painful or complicated. We promise, Luca said immediately, and his brothers nodded in agreement. I moved to sit on the coffee table, facing all three of them. Then I need you to be honest about something else. This arrangement you're proposing, where I somehow maintain relationships with all three of you. How would that even work? What would it look like? Dante leaned forward, his steel gray eyes intense. It would look like whatever we build together. There's no template for this, Isabella. We'd be creating something unprecedented. But practically speaking, I pressed, you're brothers. You run a business together. How do you navigate sharing someone's time and attention without it destroying your relationship? We've been sharing since birth, Marco pointed out. Shared a womb, shared a childhood, shared the burden of inheriting our father's empire. We know how to communicate, how to compromise, how to put family unity above individual desires. This is different, I argued. This is about emotions and intimacy and things that people usually experience privately. Is it, though? Luca asked softly. Isabella, what you make me feel, peace, hope, gentleness, those aren't things that exist in a vacuum. They exist in the context of my whole life, which includes my brothers. What Marco feels for you, the passion and joy, that doesn't threaten what I feel. It complements it. And Dante's need for you, his strategic certainty that you belong in our lives, that gives all of us permission to pursue this impossible thing. I looked at Dante. Is that true? You're certain about this? I've built my entire life on logic and strategy, he said. And logically, this should be a disaster. 3 men caring for 1 woman is a recipe for jealousy, competition, destruction. But when I analyze it strategically, when I look at who we are and what we value, it makes perfect sense. We're stronger together than apart. That's always been true for the 3 of us. Why would it be different when it includes you? Because I'm a person, not a business asset, I said. But there was no heat in the words. I was beginning to understand what they were offering, the strange logic that made this work in their minds. Exactly, Marco agreed. You're a person with complex needs that no single person could meet. You need Luca's gentleness, and my passion, and Dante's strength. Just like we need different aspects of you. The way you soften Luca's guilt, challenge my superficiality, and warm Dante's coldness. We complete each other in ways that wouldn't work if any piece was missing. I stood, pacing to the window to look out at the woods surrounding the cabin. What about intimacy? Physical intimacy? I felt my cheeks heat but forced myself to continue. That's part of relationships, and I don't know how that would work without creating jealousy or comparison. That would be negotiated between all of us, Dante said calmly, as if we were discussing a business merger, rather than something intensely personal. Boundaries, expectations, comfort levels. Everything would be discussed and agreed upon. There's no pressure, Luca added quickly. No timeline, No expectations that you owe us anything physical just because we've confessed our feelings. That part develops naturally, if and when everyone's ready. I turned back to face them. These three impossible men offering me an impossible solution. And marriage? Children? Future planning? How does any of that work when society doesn't recognize relationships like this? We'd structure it legally to protect everyone, Dante said, slipping into his strategic mode. Trusts, medical directives, power of attorney documents. We'd create legal frameworks that honor our commitments even if they're not traditional marriages. As for children, Marco said with a soft smile, we're brothers, Isabella. If you chose to have children with one of us, they'd be raised by all of us. They'd have 3 fathers who love them, and a mother who's brilliant and brave. They'd be protected and cherished by an entire family. The image he painted was so vivid, so tempting, that I felt tears prickling at my eyes. I'd never let myself imagine a family before, too focused on survival and success. But now I could see it. Children with dark hair and hazel eyes, learning finance from Dante and art from Marco, and kindness from Luca. Growing up knowing they were loved absolutely by multiple people who would die to protect them. I'm scared, I admitted. Scared this can't possibly work. Scared I'll damage your relationship as brothers. Scared that the world outside these walls will destroy something so fragile before it has a chance to grow. We're scared too, Luca said, crossing to me. He stopped just close enough that I could feel his warmth, but far enough to give me space. Scared we'll fail you. Scared our world will hurt you. Scared that loving you will be the thing that finally breaks us. But I'd rather be scared and brave with you than safe and empty without you. So would I, Marco said, joining us at the window. And I, Dante added, completing their circle around me without crowding me. I looked at each of them in turn, seeing the fear and hope and determination in their faces. They were offering me everything they had, everything they were, with no guarantee I wouldn't destroy it all. But I'd already made my choice, really. I'd made it when I agreed to work for them, despite knowing they were dangerous. I'd made it when I felt my heart crack open in 3 different directions and decided not to fight it. I'd made it when I realized that conventional happiness had never been what I wanted anyway. Okay, I whispered. Okay, we'll try. But we do this carefully, with constant communication and absolute honesty. And the moment any of you starts to resent this arrangement, the moment it threatens your brotherhood, we stop. I won't be responsible for destroying what you've built together. The relief that washed over their faces was palpable. Luca's shoulders relaxed from their tense line. Marco's smile returned, warm and genuine. Dante's eyes softened in a way I'd only seen a handful of times. There are ground rules, I continued, needing to establish boundaries before emotion overwhelmed logic. First, no secrets. About your business. About danger I might face. About feelings or concerns any of you have. Complete transparency. Agreed, they said in unison. Second, I'm not property. I make my own choices about my time, my work, my life. You can advise and protect, but you don't control. Understood, Dante confirmed. Third, you 3 need to maintain your own relationship. Regular time together without me. Conversations that don't revolve around me. Boundaries that protect your brotherhood. I won't be the thing that breaks you apart. We promise, Luca said softly. And finally, I took a deep breath. We take this slowly. I've never been in a relationship like this. I need time to figure out what it means, how to navigate my feelings for each of you, without neglecting anyone or comparing you to each other. As slow as you need, Marco agreed. We're not going anywhere. The tension that had filled the cabin since their arrival finally broke. We stood there, in an awkward circle, none of us quite sure what came next, how to transition from negotiation to whatever this new reality would be. So, I said, a slightly hysterical laugh escaping. What now? Do we shake hands, draw up a contract, have a group hug? Marco laughed, the sound breaking through the remaining awkwardness. I vote for the hug, but I'll settle for dinner. I'm starving, and I saw a kitchen that looks like it hasn't been used in years. Let me cook for you, for all of us. You cook? I asked, surprised. One of my many hidden talents, he said with a wink, already moving toward the kitchen. Luca, you're on wine duty. Dante, help Isabella relax because she looks like she's about to vibrate out of her skin with nervous energy. They dispersed to their assigned tasks with the smooth coordination of people who'd been working together their entire lives. Dante caught my hand gently, leading me to the couch. Sit, he commanded softly. Breathe. You just agreed to something unprecedented, and I can see you're already second-guessing yourself. I am, I admitted, sinking into the cushions. This is insane. We're insane. This can't possibly work. Probably not, he agreed, settling beside me, but maintaining a respectful distance. Statistically, the odds of this arrangement succeeding long-term are minimal. There are too many variables, too many opportunities for jealousy and miscommunication and external interference. You're really bad at reassurance, I observed. I'm not trying to reassure you, he said. I'm trying to be honest. Yes, this is unlikely to work. Yes, we're attempting something that defies conventional relationship structures. Yes, there will be challenges we can't predict and problems we don't know how to solve. But Isabella, I've built an empire on taking calculated risks, and you are a risk I'm willing to take, regardless of the odds. I turned to look at him, really look at him. Dante Moretti, cold and strategic and controlled, telling me I was worth risking failure. It shouldn't have been romantic, but somehow it was. What if I hurt you? I asked quietly. What if I can't love all of you equally? Or I favor one over the others, or my feelings change over time? Then we adapt, he said simply. Love isn't a finite resource, Isabella. It's not mathematics where showing affection to one brother necessarily means less for the others. Human emotions are more complex than that, and if your feelings do change, if this evolves into something different than what we're starting with, then we'll adjust our expectations and structures accordingly. You make it sound so logical. Because it is logical, he insisted. Emotions are just neurochemistry. Relationships are just contracts between people. Love is just a series of choices we make repeatedly. I choose you, Isabella. Every day and every decision. I choose you being part of my life. That's all this is. A choice we're all making together. Luca appeared with wine glasses, distributing them before settling on my other side. Dante's right, though he's explaining it in the most unromantic way possible. We're choosing you, and you're choosing us. That's the foundation. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. What if someone gets hurt? I pressed, needing to voice all my fears, before I could let myself believe this might actually work. What if you three start competing for my attention? Or I start playing you against each other? Or... Then we talk about it, Luca interrupted gently. Isabella, we've been navigating complex relationship dynamics our entire lives. Do you know how many times Dante and Marco have wanted to kill each other over business decisions? How many times Marco and I have disagreed about how to handle family matters? How many times I've had to mediate between them when their approaches clash? Constantly, Marco called from the kitchen. "We fight all the time, but we also love each other enough to work through it. Adding you to the equation doesn't change that. If anything, it gives us more motivation to communicate well because we all want this to succeed." "We're not perfect," Dante added. "We're going to mess up, say the wrong thing, make mistakes. But we're committed to fixing those mistakes rather than letting them fester. That's what family means." Family? The word settled over me like a warm blanket. I'd lost my only family 2 years ago when my mother died. I'd been alone since then, focused on work because I didn't know how to be anything else. But these 3 men were offering me something I'd never thought I'd have again. Belonging, connection, people who would show up for me repeatedly. "Tell me something," I said, looking between Luca and Dante. "How do you feel about each other, knowing you both have feelings for me? Is there jealousy? Resentment? Honestly?" Luca considered. "Relief. When I first realized I was falling for you, I thought I'd have to hide it from my brothers, that it would create a rift between us. When I learned they felt the same way, it was like permission to feel everything fully. I don't have to choose between my family and my heart because they're the same thing now. I feel competitive," Dante admitted. "That's my nature. I want to be the one you turn to when you need strength or advice. But that competitiveness isn't directed at my brothers. It's directed at being the best version of myself I can be for you. They push me to be better, and I do the same for them. We make each other better," Luca said simply. "For you and for each other. That's how this works." Marco emerged from the kitchen with plates of pasta that smelled incredible, setting them on the coffee table with a flourish. "Dinner is served. And while we eat, I think we should establish some actual logistics, because I've been thinking about the practical aspects of this arrangement." We arranged ourselves around the coffee table, and I had to smile at the domesticity of it all. 3 dangerous mafia brothers and me, eating pasta and discussing our unconventional relationship like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Logistics," Marco continued once we'd all started eating. "You're still living in your apartment, which isn't secure. You've been staying at the estate, but that was under duress. We need to figure out where you're going to live." "I could continue at the estate," I suggested. "I have my own space there, and it makes sense from a security perspective." "But is it what you want?" Luca asked. "Or is it just practical?" I considered. My apartment had been home, but it had also been lonely. The estate had been overwhelming at first, but I'd grown comfortable there. The idea of going back to living alone after experiencing their constant presence felt hollow. "I think the estate makes sense," I said slowly. "At least for now. But I'd want my own space within it. A room that's mine, where I can retreat when I need solitude or space to think." "Done," Dante said immediately. "We'll set up a suite for you. Private bedroom, sitting room, bathroom, your own sanctuary within the larger home." "And work?" I asked. "I'm still restructuring your finances, but I don't want that to be the only thing I do. I want to maintain my professional skills, maybe take on some consulting work outside your organization. As long as it doesn't conflict with our security or reveal confidential information, that's fine," Dante agreed. "In fact, it would be good for you to maintain connections outside our world, give you perspective and independence." "What about time together?" Marco asked. "Oh, how do we balance individual time with each of you versus all of us together versus your need for alone time?" It was a good question, one I'd been wondering about myself. Maybe we could establish a loose structure. Like, certain evenings are for all of us together. Other times are flexible for individual time as it naturally develops. And I need at least 1 day a week That's just mine. No expectations or obligations. Sounds reasonable, Luca agreed. We're all busy with various aspects of running the business anyway. The structure gives us something to build around without being restrictive. We continued discussing logistics as we ate, how to handle public appearances, what to tell people about our relationship, how to manage holidays and special occasions. It was strange and wonderful, negotiating the parameters of something that shouldn't exist, but felt increasingly real with every decision we made. After dinner, we moved to the couch, and for the first time, I let myself relax into their presence without overthinking it. Luca sat beside me, his arm along the back of the couch in a gesture that was protective without being possessive. Marco claimed the other side, his warmth seeping through where our legs touched. Dante took the armchair, but angled it so he could see all of us. His usual control softened by the wine and the intimacy of the evening. I have a question, I said, emboldened by wine and comfort. How did you three become so close? Most siblings have rivalries, competition. You clearly disagree sometimes, but there's this underlying unity that seems unshakable. Necessity, Dante said. Our father was brilliant but brutal. He pitted us against each other when we were young, thinking competition would make us stronger. But we figured out early that we were more powerful united than divided. We made a pact when we were 12. Never let anything or anyone come between us. Protect each other before protecting ourselves. That pact has been tested, Marco added. Women who tried to seduce one of us to create division. Business partners who tried to negotiate separately to get better terms. Even our father, before he died, tried to name one of us as his primary heir. But we refused. We structured the inheritance so all three of us have equal power, so no decision can be made without consensus. It's made us slower sometimes, Luca admitted. 3 people having to agree means we can't be as reactive as other families. But it's also made us nearly impossible to destroy because there's no single point of failure. And now you're adding me to that equation, I said. Doesn't that worry you? I could be a vulnerability, a way for your enemies to hurt you. You already are, Dante said bluntly. Your kidnapping proved that. People will always try to use what we care about against us. But that doesn't mean we stop caring. It means we get better at protecting what matters. We're going to make mistakes with this, Marco said seriously. There will be times when one of us gets more attention and the others feel neglected. Times when you're overwhelmed by 3 intense personalities. Times when the outside world makes this harder than it needs to be. But I need you to promise that when those times come, you'll talk to us instead of running. I promise, I said. But you have to promise the same thing. If this starts to damage your relationship as brothers, you tell me immediately. I won't be the reason you 3 fall apart. We promise, they said together. And I was beginning to recognize that united front, the way they operated as a singular unit, even while maintaining individual identities. The evening grew late and exhaustion began to creep in. I'd barely slept the night before, too busy processing emotions and making decisions. Now, with those decisions made and the immediate crisis resolved, my body was demanding rest. You should sleep, Luca said softly, noticing my eyes drooping. It's been an emotionally exhausting day. Will you stay? I asked before I could think better of it. Not in a, I don't want to be alone tonight. Is that okay? More than okay, Marco assured me. We'll take the other bedrooms. You get the master suite. But we're here if you need us. I started to stand, but Dante stopped me with a hand on my arm. Isabella, thank you for giving us this chance, for being brave enough to try something that scares all of us. You won't regret it. I hope not, I said, with a small smile, because if this goes wrong, I've just committed to the most complicated breakup in history. Marco laughed, and the sound followed me as I headed to the bedroom. I got ready for sleep in a daze, my mind still processing everything that had happened. When I finally lay down in the unfamiliar bed, I expected to toss and turn with anxiety. Instead, I fell asleep almost immediately, my last thought being that for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. The next 3 months were a learning curve, unlike anything I'd experienced. We returned to the estate together, and I settled into the suite they'd prepared for me. Beautiful and private, with enough space to feel like my own, while still being part of the larger home. We developed rhythms and routines. Mornings were often quiet, each of us preparing for the day in our own way. I'd work on financial restructuring in my office, while Dante handled strategic planning. Marco managed external relationships, and Luca oversaw security and operations. Lunches were usually informal, whoever was available gathering in the kitchen or dining room. But dinners were sacred. All 4 of us, discussing our days, debating everything from business decisions to philosophy to what movie to watch afterward. I learned their patterns. Dante was sharpest in the morning, his strategic mind at its peak before noon. Marco was a night person, coming alive in the evenings with energy and creativity. Luca was consistent throughout the day, steady and reliable, regardless of the hour. And slowly, carefully, intimacy developed. It started small. Luca taking my hand as we walked through the gardens. Marco's arm around my shoulders during movie nights. Dante's fingers brushing my back as he passed behind my chair. The first kiss happened with Luca, a month into our arrangement. We'd been working late in my office, and he'd said something that made me laugh. I'd looked up to find him watching me, with such tenderness that my breath caught. The kiss was gentle, unquestioning, his hand cradling my face like I was something precious. When we pulled apart, he'd whispered, "I've wanted to do that since the first day I met you." Marco's first kiss was different, passionate and playful, happening in the kitchen when he'd challenged me to taste test his cooking. He'd pulled me close, his mouth capturing mine with a heat that made my knees weak. Finally, he'd murmured against my lips, I was starting to think I'd have to wait forever. Dante's first kiss came last, and it was the most intense. We'd been arguing about a business decision, standing in his study late at night. The argument had escalated, both of us stubborn and refusing to concede. Then suddenly he'd crossed the distance between us, his hand tangling in my hair, as he kissed me with a fierceness that stole my breath. "You're infuriating," he'd said when he pulled back. "And perfect." Each relationship developed its own character. With Luca, I found peace and emotional safety. We'd talk for hours about everything and nothing, comfortable in silence or conversation. He saw through my defenses to the vulnerabilities I hid, and he treasured them instead of exploiting them. With Marco, I found joy and adventure. He made me laugh, challenged me to try new things, taught me to appreciate beauty and passion in everyday moments. He was spontaneous where I was planned, emotional where I was logical, and somehow we balanced each other perfectly. With Dante, I found intellectual partnership and unwavering support. We worked together seamlessly, challenging and complementing each other's thinking. He demanded excellence from me and gave it in return, pushing me to be better while accepting me exactly as I was. And together, the 4 of us created something that felt like home. There were challenges, of course. Times when I felt overwhelmed by 3 intense personalities. Moments of jealousy, when one brother got more of my attention. Disagreements about how to handle situations or what boundaries should exist. But we talked through everything, just as we'd promised. Late-night conversations about feelings and fears. Family meetings to address concerns before they became problems. Individual check-ins to make sure no one felt neglected or taken for granted. The outside world was trickier. We kept our relationship private, with only the most trusted family members knowing the truth. Publicly, I was their financial consultant and family friend. It was a necessary fiction that sometimes chafed, but we'd all agreed that complete transparency would put everyone at risk. My father remained a ghost, neither appearing nor being found despite intermittent searches. The message I'd received had been the last communication from whoever was watching us. And while security remained tight, no additional threats materialized. It was almost enough to make me believe we'd actually pulled off the impossible. Then one evening, 6 months into our arrangement, Dante called a family meeting. His expression was serious enough to make my stomach clench with worry. "We have a situation," he said, once we were all gathered in his study. "Our expansion into European markets has attracted attention from some old families who believe we're encroaching on their territory. They've made it clear they don't appreciate our presence." "How clear?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "Death threats clear," Marco said bluntly. "Against all of us, but particularly against you, Isabella. They see you as our weakness, the soft spot they can exploit." My blood ran cold. We'd been so careful, so discreet about our relationship. How had they found out? "There's been a leak," Luca said, answering my unspoken question. "Someone in our organization has been feeding information to our enemies. We're working to identify who, but in the meantime, we need to increase security." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means you don't go anywhere alone," Dante said. "It means we limit your exposure, keep you behind our walls until we've neutralized the threat." "No," I said immediately. "I'm not going to become a prisoner because someone made threats. That's exactly what they want. To make me a liability that you have to manage instead of a partner who contributes to this family." "Isabella," Luca started, but I cut him off. "No. We agreed that I make my own choices about my life. You can advise, you can provide security, but you don't get to lock me away because you're scared. I won't live like that." "Even if it puts you in danger?" Dante challenged. "We're all in danger," I countered. "That's the reality of your world, of the life I chose when I agreed to be part of this family. I won't let fear control my decisions or make me less than what I am." The brothers exchanged frustrated glances, and I could see them struggling between their protective instincts and their promise to respect my autonomy. "Compromise," Marco suggested. "You maintain your routines, but with enhanced security. Bodyguards, armored vehicles, advanced teams checking any location you visit. You get to live your life. We get to sleep at night knowing you're protected." I wanted to argue, wanted to insist I didn't need that level of protection. But I also understood that my safety affected all of them, that refusing reasonable security measures would be selfish. "Fine," I agreed, "but nothing that draws attention or makes me look like I'm under house arrest. Discreet security that lets me maintain some semblance of normal life." "Deal," Dante said, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. He hated compromises, preferred absolute control and certainty. This middle ground went against every instinct he had. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the precariousness of the life I'd built. One leak, one threat, and everything could come crashing down. Was it worth it? Was this unconventional love worth the constant danger? A soft knock on my door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Come in," I called, not surprised when all three brothers entered. "We knew you'd be awake," Lucas said, settling on the edge of my bed. "Knew you'd be overthinking everything." "Can you blame me?" I asked. 6 months ago, I was a normal auditor with a normal life. Now I'm in a relationship with three mafia brothers, who are apparently being targeted by international criminal organizations because of me. "Not because of you," Dante corrected, taking the armchair near my window. "Because of us. Because we're expanding into territories that threaten established powers. You're caught up in it, yes, but you're not the cause." "That's not as comforting as you think it is," I said. Marco climbed onto the bed on my other side, his presence warm and solid. "Do you regret it? Choosing this life? Choosing us?" I thought about it, really considered the question. My life had been safe before them. Predictable. Lonely, yes, but uncomplicated. Now it was dangerous and unconventional, and constantly challenging. But it was also full of love and purpose and belonging. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it. I'm scared, and I'm frustrated with the limitations. But I don't regret choosing you." "Good," Luca said softly, taking my hand. "Because we don't regret choosing you either. And we're going to keep you safe, Isabella. Whatever it takes." "What if keeping me safe means sacrificing your business objectives?" I asked. "What if I become the reason you can't expand, can't grow, can't achieve your goals?" "Then we adjust our goals," Dante said simply. "The business matters, but you matter more. We've already proven that when we came for you, when you were taken. The empire can be rebuilt, can be restructured, but you're irreplaceable." Tears pricked at my eyes. These three men, who'd built their entire lives around power and control and strategic advancement, were telling me I mattered more than all of it. "I love you," I said, the words escaping before I could think about them. "All of you. I don't know if that's how this is supposed to work. If I'm supposed to love you equally or differently or what. But I love you, and I needed you to know that." The room went still, all three of them frozen by my confession. Then Luca was pulling me into his arms, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you too. So much it terrifies me." "As do I," Marco said, his hand finding mine. "You've become essential to my happiness, to my sense of purpose. I love you, Isabella." Dante rose from the armchair, moving to the bed. His steel-gray eyes were softer than I'd ever seen them. "I love you. It's not something I say easily or often, but it's true. You're part of me now, part of us, and we protect what we love. With everything we have, we stayed like that for a while. Tangled together in my bed, not talking, just existing in the comfort of physical closeness and emotional honesty. Eventually, exhaustion claimed us, and we fell asleep in a pile of limbs and warmth. I woke in the morning to find all three of them still there. Luca pressed against my back, Marco's head on my shoulder, Dante's hand tangled with mine. It should have been uncomfortable or awkward. Instead, it felt perfect. This was my family now. Unconventional, dangerous, complicated, but mine. The threat never materialized. 3 weeks after that tense meeting, Dante's security team identified the leak. A low-level employee who'd been selling information for drugs. They eliminated the threat quietly, and the European families, seeing our swift response, backed down from their aggressive posturing. Life returned to our new normal. I continued restructuring the Moretti finances, slowly transitioning their empire into something that could withstand international scrutiny. The brothers continued running their operations, all making decisions together, protecting their people and territories. And I continued loving them, learning to navigate the complex dynamics of a relationship that shouldn't work but somehow did. 1 year after that first dinner, where they'd offered me an impossible choice, we had a private ceremony in the estate's gardens. It wasn't legal, wouldn't be recognized by any government or institution. But with their most trusted family members as witnesses, I made vows to all three of them, and they made vows to me. I promise to love you as individuals and as one, I said, my voice steady despite my tears. To challenge you and support you. To protect your bond as brothers while building our bond as partners. I promise to be brave when it matters and honest always. I promise to build a life with you that honors both tradition and our own unique path. Their vows to me were equally powerful, each brother promising different things that reflected who they were and what they brought to our relationship. Luca promised gentleness and safety, to be my peace in chaos and my comfort in fear. Marco promised joy and passion, to keep our life full of laughter and beauty and adventure. Dante promised strength and loyalty, to be my foundation and my strategic partner in building our future. Together, they promised to love me absolutely, to protect our family fiercely, and to never let anything destroy what we'd built together. As the small gathering celebrated afterward, I caught glimpses of our future. Children running through these gardens, their laughter echoing off the walls. Growing old, surrounded by people who chose to love each other, despite all the reasons they shouldn't. Building something that would outlast us, a new kind of family that proved love could be as unconventional and complex as the people who shared it. I thought about my mother, who'd run from this world to protect me. Would she have understood why I'd chosen to stay? Would she have approved of the life I was building? I like to think she would have. She taught me to be strong, to trust my judgment, to build my own path rather than following someone else's. This path was mine, chosen with full awareness of its dangers and complexities, and I'd choose it again, every single time. I stood in my office at Moretti Industries, reviewing the final documents that would transition the last of their questionable operations into legitimate business structures. 2 years of intensive work, but we'd done it. The Moretti Empire was now a clean, legal, internationally recognized corporation. "You did it," Dante said from the doorway, pride evident in his voice. "You actually did it." "We did it," I corrected. "All of us together." He crossed to me, pulling me into his arms. "Do you know what this means? It means our children will inherit something they can be proud of. It means we can build a future without constantly looking over our shoulders for federal investigations." "Children?" I asked, my heart skipping. "Are you telling me something?" "Not yet," he said with a rare smile. "But I'm asking." "We've been talking, the three of us. We're ready if you are. We're ready to expand our family, to build the next generation." Tears filled my eyes. We discussed children in abstract terms, but hearing Dante say they were ready, that they wanted this with me, made it suddenly real. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm ready too." That evening, we celebrated with Marco's finest wine and Luca's carefully prepared meal. We talked about the future, about nurseries and names, and how to explain to children that they had 3 fathers who loved them equally. "They'll think it's normal," Marco said confidently, "because it will be their normal. They'll grow up knowing that love doesn't have to fit traditional molds, that family is defined by choice and commitment rather than legal documents." "They'll be protected," Luca added, "by all of us, by the family we've built." By the empire we've transformed into something legitimate and strong. They'll be extraordinary, Dante concluded, because they'll have you as a mother, teaching them to be brilliant and brave and principled. I looked around the table at these three men who'd become my whole world, who'd loved me enough to build something unprecedented, who'd changed the trajectory of their empire to give our future children something better. My mother had run from this world, and I'd walked back into it. But in doing so, I'd found something she'd never had. A family built on choice rather than obligation. Love that was freely given rather than demanded. And a future full of possibility instead of fear. You know, I said, raising my wine glass, when I first walked into your office 2 years ago to audit your company, I never imagined this would be my life. Regrets? Marco asked with a smile. Not a single one, I replied honestly. You were right, Luca. That first day, you said I was going to change everything. But you changed me too. All of you did. To change, Dante proposed, raising his own glass. To unconventional choices and impossible love and building something extraordinary together. To family, Luca added. To us, Marco finished. We clinked glasses, and I knew with absolute certainty that this was where I belonged. Not despite the complications and unconventionality, but because of them. I'd loved one, desired another, and needed the third. And somehow, impossibly, I'd gotten to keep all three. The sound of children's laughter filled the estate's gardens as I watched 2-year-old twins, Marco Jr., Nates and Elena, chase each other around the fountain. My hand rested on my pregnant belly, feeling the flutter of our third child, the daughter Luca was convinced would have my stubbornness and Dante's strategic mind. You're thinking too hard again, Marco said, settling beside me on the bench. I can see the wheels turning. I was thinking about how far we've come, I admitted. 5 years ago, I was alone in a studio apartment, drowning in student loans and loneliness. Now I have this family, these beautiful children, a career I'm proud of, and 3 men who love me unconditionally. And we have you, he replied softly, the woman who transformed our entire world without even trying. Dante appeared with Elena in his arms, her dark curls bouncing as she reached for me. Mama, watch me. I took her, settling her in my lap, ear watching as Marco Jr. showed off his new climbing skills on the garden sculpture. Luca was spotting him carefully, his protective nature extending to the next generation, just as we'd known it would. Our family is chaos, I observed, watching the scene with contentment. Beautiful chaos, Dante corrected, his hand finding my shoulder. The best kind. As the afternoon sun painted everything gold, I reflected on the unconventional path that had brought me here. Society might never fully understand or accept our family structure, but within these walls, we'd built something extraordinary. 3 brothers who'd learned that loving the same woman didn't divide them, but multiplied their strength. One woman who discovered that the heart's capacity for love was infinite when given to the right people, and children who would grow up knowing that family was defined by choice, commitment, and unconditional love, not by conventional standards or traditional structures. I'd walked into the Moretti brothers' world expecting to audit their finances. Instead, I'd found my home, my purpose, and my future. And I'd do it all again without hesitation, because this beautiful, complicated, unconventional life was exactly where I belonged. Ready for more unconventional love stories? Follow me for tales of hearts that refuse to fit traditional molds, families built on choice rather than convention, and love that defies all expectations. Because sometimes the best stories are the ones that dare to imagine different possibilities. Drop a comment telling me which brother you connected with most. The gentle protector Luca, the passionate artist Marco, or the strategic leader Dante? Or are you team all three like Isabella? Let's discuss. Share this story with someone who believes love doesn't have to follow the rules to be real.